Awesome. Okay, so good morning, guys. We're here at Plug and Play. I'd like to welcome you to the Future of Workers' Compensation webinar. Today we'll be discussing the technology side of workers' compensation, the current status of the industry, and what it'll look like in the future. We'll dive into the growing risks that insurance companies should be worrying about in regards to prevention and the long-tail implications that workers' comp claims can have. A few housekeeping notes. We have an event coming up on April 25th dedicated to property and casualty insurance. It'll be in collaboration with our mobility, real estate and construction, and retail verticals. The link to register will be sent to you tomorrow following this webinar with a discount code. And as always, follow us on social media for continuous updates for other events and other content. So Hutch will be moderating the conversation, asking questions to our panelists, integrating them throughout the conversation. So I hope you guys enjoy. Feel free to post any questions or comments in the Q&A section, and we'll be happy to respond and answer your questions.
Wonderful. So thank you, Katie. For those who don't know, Katie Hai, behind the camera over here, she does a lot of our marketing and all kinds of jobs at the crazy environment that we call the Plug and Play InsurTech team. My name is Hutch Maranye. It might say Katie in the corner there, but I am Hutch. I work here on the InsurTech team for the last couple of years, really focusing on driving technology adoption into the enterprise. We are very excited to have this webinar today. We'll be covering a lot of different subjects in these new series, and workers' compensation has been a topic that's really been top of mind for a lot of carriers lately. We're seeing fascinating startup companies really leveraging new sources of data and IoT devices, and so we're very lucky today to be joined by some of the minds and people who are really at the cutting edge, looking to change this industry. So joined us today, we have both Adnan and Craig from the AF Group, a very progressive carrier. Workers' comp is a big focus for them. They've really leveraged the power of analytics in their DNA for a long time now, and the success is really shown. As well as Emilio, representing SafeSite, one of the first startup companies to actually come through the Plug and Play startup program on the insurance side. Who have now made some interesting pivots, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about that later today. To get things started, I would love to turn it over to you guys, introduce yourselves, and share a little bit about your history and what you guys have done in the workers' comp space. Perhaps, Emilio, you could start us off?
Absolutely. So I've been in the insurance industry for about 29 years, focused on the commercial side of the business. I had a large commercial brokerage. I had an MGA, had a premium finance company, had a captive company out of DC, had multiple reinsurance cells out of Bermuda, and focused mainly and loved the alternative risk transfer side. Outside of workers' comp, I love workers' comp as well. I'm looking at seeing how we can integrate technology into the ecosystem as we have a dramatically aging workforce in the industry, seeing how we can simplify those processes and help the industry grow exponentially through technology.
Wonderful. Adnan, I would love to hear from you a little bit about what you've done in the workers' comp space and how you ended up in workers' comp.
Absolutely. So I grew up in Massachusetts. My first job out of college was working for Liberty Mutual as a commercial casualty underwriter, underwriting Fortune 100 companies. So I underwrote workers' compensation, both on the loss sensitive side and the guarantee cost side. I did general liability as well as commercial auto. So I did that for about 7 years. Completed my MBA from a small college out of Massachusetts. Decided to move to the Middle East to work for Zurich, based out of their office in Dubai. So I was looking at casualty business in Saudi Arabia, remaining part of the Middle East, Southeast Asia. So excellent experience personally and professionally. Came back to the U.S. to work for Travelers Insurance based out of their Hartford office as part of their workers' compensation product and underwriting team. So did that for 5 years, and about 7 months ago connected with Able, and then ended up joining AF Group as part of its innovation team.
Oh, very exciting. And Craig, coming over from the laboratory over there, would love to hear some of your experience and maybe a little background on all the tools you're tinkering with back there.
Yeah, sorry about that. We got a lot of stuff going on here. So one of the things, I came in as actually having my own business, and I was hired on as a consultant before, like 2008. And I came in actually into workers' compensation more or less through osmosis. I learned a lot of different things, like the claims and the different areas I'm in now in innovation. So in 2010, I actually joined full-time and implemented a system called Care Analytics, which we actually put together to help to get our injured workers back to the most experienced providers by using analytics system. In fact, it's our only system that's patented in our company. It's called Care Analytics. Put that in for 2 years, and we actually get into working with Johns Hopkins and writing some papers there with on opioids when the industry didn't even know what opioids were. So we actually put that paper together, and because of that, we created a system called early detection, which allows us to kind of look at injured workers and see if we can help them out if we see any problems in that area. So from that, we actually about 3 years ago we started an innovation team, and now with Adnan and 2 others, we're actually looking at a lot of different things. Artificial intelligence. We even get into things like VR, augmented reality, and blockchain, and that type of thing. And so we're continuing to do that and working with a great team there.
That's wonderful. And for those of you listening, the Care Analytics platform at AF Group is quite well known and really remarkable. At its core, it's really finding a more effective way to match patients and injured workers with the right doctors and care providers in order to reduce the cost of those claims and ensure back to the workforce sooner. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
and it's proven very successful both for our company and for the injured worker.
Exactly. And then what I've seen, we've heard great things and talk about a goal that's not only good for the bottom line, but also good for a moral standpoint of really coming in here and helping people get back to where they need to be. So we think it's a great story, and it really kind of shows, harnessing the power of analytics and looking at new data sources and updating your systems is something that has shown has brought great success to the AF Group team, and we're excited to have you guys here right now. Wonderful. So to kind of get things started, I'd like to kind of create a bit of a baseline. So for those who are maybe in the audience who may not be as familiar or have different understandings of what workers' compensation really is, I'd love to hear from you guys on how you really define workers' compensation and what role you think it plays in society. Adnan, I would love to start with you.
Sure. So workers' compensation, if I go back to my training class back 15 years ago, just to kind of set the stage to make sure we're on the same page, workers' compensation, as the definition is, we provide coverage when the injured worker gets injured. The broad definition of the policy basically is that when you get injured in the scope of employment or arising out of employment, so basically anytime you get injured, we will come in and provide coverage for both medical treatment and, of course, physical therapy. We'll try to bring you back to work. But in terms of the importance of workers' compensation, the way I like to take a look at things is if you compare a country or a city, maybe whatever that case may be, you can compare that with a country where you do not have the workers' compensation protection system. So let's just kind of keep it very basic. Here in the U.S., if an injured worker gets injured, of course, they call the insurance company. The insurance company will go through quick, summary of questions, and they will start processing the claim. You don't have to worry about paying your doctor, your MRI, your ER expenses. And if it's an indemnity claim, you go ahead and start getting, let's say, 66% of your salary. When you compare that with another country where you don't have that protection in place, you get injured, you're back at work, you have a family to support, you have bills to pay. Just think about the consequences of not having that protection. So you can imagine an employer is losing an employee. The employee, of course, who has a family to support, and of course their own health is just things may get worse because they don't have the protection in place. So I personally think workers' compensation plays a critical role in the economy, especially, of course, for the employers and as for the families as well.
Awesome. And Craig, you're somebody who kind of through osmosis, in your own words, ended up in this space. What were kind of your first impressions, and what was it that really drove you to kind of make that leap into the workers' comp world?
I think the biggest thing for me is the mission itself, is just to keep injured workers safe, or keep employees safe. And at the end of the day, we're trying to get them back to work quickly, right? So it is if you keep that focus in mind, it's actually an easy place to work at, and for me, I'm a technologist, and I see a lot of opportunity, quite honestly, in the workers' compensation space. So I think I can add to that.
Wonderful. And Emilio, you're somebody who's really taken a lot of different approaches to this market. You've played, on the reinsurance and MGA and everything else. So as you're approaching the market in the workers' comp space, what is your kind of guiding North Star? What is the underlying reason that drives you to really keep innovating here and reinventing the wheel, if you will?
Well, as any industry, you want to, if you're a professional within an industry, you want to make sure that the industry is at its best at all times. I'm an insurance nerd by heart. I love insurance. I live, breathe insurance, from the broker side, from the carrier side, from the reinsurance side, looking at efficiencies to simplify engagement with insured, maintain the return of investment for the insurance company, and make sure that everyone is whole. So for me, it's making sure that simplification of the process is key, from client engagement, from the loss, from simplifying the loss expenses, to mitigating the loss expenses, to being proactive and reactive in both aspects of the industry.
Wonderful. So there's definitely like a theme among all of you. There's a moral underlying kind of like guidance that's driving a lot of this. We need to protect the worker. We need to save the economy. This is families. This is livelihoods. This is something that's significant importance. Also, everybody's job is different. Everybody's workforce is very different. It's very hard to imagine pricing something like that. So, in your experience and maybe some examples from different industries, how do companies typically or traditionally price workers' compensation? And this is really setting a baseline of where we think, it can be changed. Adnan, you've had a lot of experience doing this, all over the world. How do you price such a wide variety of products and a wide variety of industries?
Yeah, so I think going back to my underwriting days, first and foremost, just having an understanding of the operations. As you know, of course, that workers' compensation, good thing about it is when you're underwriting it, you have class codes to deal with. So if you're a clerical employee, you fall into 8810, your sales, you're 8742. So there are a lot of different class codes. So what it does help as an underwriter, you can take a look at the payroll. Let's say it's about $100 million in payroll. You can see which could be the loss driver. So you can imagine the machine shop or the salespeople who are out there trying to sell products, they may be the loss driver. So you just try to understand which class code is driving the losses. The second best thing is looking at the risk control reports. So we have risk control consultants who are out there in the field, or with the technology that is coming through, they can do a virtual visit of the facility, try to kind of get an understanding of their the insured or the employer's safety protocols they have in place, how good they are, how effective they are. All these things combined really helps the underwriter kind of put together a pricing, or trying to come up with a pricing that they feel comfortable with. Besides the operation, besides the risk control side of the equation, you're looking at, once the claims takes place, what happens then? So if they have return to work program in place, if they have some sort of training program in place for the person to be able to come back to the exact same position, or they can find some other position. So all these quantitative information does help you put together a better program, whether it be guaranteed cost. By the way, guaranteed cost meaning zero deductible, or a loss sensitive plan where you can have a very high deductible, so the insured is taking some sort of retention. And at the end of the day, of course, you have the loss information, whether the losses are frequency based or severity based. Of course, as a carrier, you're always getting more concerned about the frequency. You want to contain the frequency. Severity could be a 1 every 3 year, 1 every 4 year, 1 every 5 year event, and trying to understand the loss history as well. So if they used to have an operations which was not automated, and of course about a year ago they automated the operations, then you're thinking, hey, you know what, that loss is not going to happen as frequently as used to, or the severity is not going to be there. So there's a lot of different things that are going in to help you put together pricing. And at the end of the day, you have to you have to be compliant. So as you know, we follow the NCCI loss costs. The insurance companies are putting together their loss cost multipliers. So it eventually boils down to what pricing you can charge, i.e. the level of comfort you have. But there's tremendous amount of other variables. I mean, I'm sure I'm forgetting 50% of those variables that we consider when we're underwriting the risk.
Absolutely. So Emilio, I mean, that's an infinite amount of, data sources, right? You have data sources coming in that are unstructured. They're from different types of sources. I mean, it's very difficult, as somebody who's been, kind of building new models and things like that in this space, where do you see a lot of these gaps? I mean, like, what are some of the leading indicators that you've come across in your experience, or what are the things that, insurance companies have been pricing on traditionally that may not be, as indicative of risk as an MGA might be able to take advantage of?
Well, on the technology side, we see, your traditional insurance company is looking at pricing in the way they price is they grab loss history, they get a supplemental application, which has very standardized questions. Let's say it's 30 to 40 questions based on the type of industry that they're focusing on. And then they send that with the standard Accord 130 to the carrier for quoting. The carrier looks at the data, standardized model mentality, look at it, they have a predictive model, they plug it into that, then the model spits out a price. The underwriter may look at it. If it's if it's under $10,000, they might ignore it and not even look at it. And then anything above that, they might put an eye on it and send it on. It's very traditional. It's a very cookie cutter mentality, the way that most carriers have been doing it. AF Group is very, very proactive in how they do it. They have models that are very interesting, and I give you guys kudos for that. But what we're doing with our MGA, we're building an MGA, and what Foresight is doing with it is we're looking at different data sources, instead of grabbing your typical 40 data points from a supplemental application and having loss history, we're connecting with the respective states that we're looking at going into. We're grabbing data from bureaus if it's available. We're looking at different data points from different vendors. We're grabbing public and private data points. On an average client, we're looking at about 220 different data points that we're looking at. Let's say if it's a contractor, we'll grab actual permits that they've pulled. We look at the permits, we compare them to the class codes automatically, and we'll our predictive modeling to show what we can pull more proactively in the underwriting phase, so we can price the actual insured at a better level.
Wonderful. So Craig, in the workshop, you tell you're always looking at new ways of, what's the next data source I can leverage? What's the next IoT device that's out there? Things like that. Kind of setting that up. Do you feel like we are adequately using enough wearable data, or enough, or adequately using the data sources that are available to us today for pricing these products? I mean, do we have a moral obligation where we should be doing these things in order to better protect people? And additionally, what are the things that you guys have taken? Because as Emilio just said, AF Group has been proactive about this, where a lot of others haven't. And so what has that experience been like? And what do you think, what have been some of the big changes you guys have made over the last couple of years in that transformational process? I know that was kind of a loaded question.
Sure. So one of the things, in fact, I just went to an IoT symposium yesterday in Madison, Wisconsin, and one of the things that, they had talked about was how, IoT can help in insurance, and how it can help in life insurance, crop insurance, all kinds of different insurance. But the one insurance it didn't really cover, unfortunately, is workers' comp. We're kind of lagging in that area, unfortunately, and I think IoT in particular, you really look at just wearables, and how do wearables actually help with workers' compensation. We've done 2 pilots already at this point. We're working on a third with MakeYouSafe. And one of the things we notice is in that industry, we don't know how to use the data. In fact, even the companies that give it to us, we don't know how to use it. Do you plug it into, where we do the predictive model? Do we plug it in somewhere else? And honestly, those questions were really in its infancy when it comes to the wearable data. And we're really only looking at two different use cases. For wearables, how does it protect or how does it help the injured worker post-injury? And again, we have issues with both. Like, for instance, when you go to an employer, how do we have everybody wear a wearable and not think that that's kind of Big Brother looking after you? And how do we convince employers that, you're going to get a discount or you pick up the price? Who picks up the price? Is it the employer? Is it the agent? Is it the insured? The carrier? So there's a lot of questions. I think we're getting into this. We're saying, hey, let's try it out. Let's kind of get in there and kind of play with it. But I think that's where we're at as an industry and as a company.
Absolutely. The Big Brother watch is definitely a little bit scary, but everybody seems quite comfortable with the cell phone in their pocket at this point.
That's true.
So one of the things that is kind of the blaring obvious situation here is that, the future of work is changing dramatically, right? I hate using numbers here. They vary based on every projection, but the percentage of the population that will be in an on-demand work job, the percentage of the population who 5-10 years from now will be doing entirely different jobs, entirely different skills that are required of them, are significant and quite scary in a lot of fronts. With this in mind, that the future of work is changing dramatically, then the future of risk has to change with it, and so does the way we price and deliver that risk, especially in places like on-demand economies where, jobs are changing constantly, risk exposure is changing constantly. So what are some of the blaring trends you see, in the younger generations or, in the technology that's being adopted that you think might have a significant impact on the way we price and deliver insurance products in the future? With this one, we'll start off with you, Emilio.
A loaded question. With the gig economy, obviously, a lot of workers are deciding to work by themselves. They're currently self-employed. They're moving away from the standardized traditional model of what work is. As we evolve as a society and there's more opportunities for them to do that, we're going to have less of a traditional workforce. That's going to impact the healthcare system dramatically. You're moving away from workers' compensation to traditional healthcare. A lot of people are uninsured, and the ones that are uninsured, what's going to happen with them on a societal basis? What's going to happen to the current workforce that we have working? I think they're going to be more proactive in trying to maintain a level of work quality, to be more proactive and progressive in what they do. So I think it's going to be a very interesting flow of changes that we have coming up in the next decade or two.
As somebody who's been in the world of pricing risk constantly and changing in different markets, how do you guys see these trends evolving and insurance companies possibly keeping up with it all?
Yeah, so I want to get into a bit of technical side of the equation on the workers' compensation and gig economy. So we have looked into the subject, not with the F Group, but actually in my previous life. And if you think about it, workers' compensation is workers' compensation. So these are individual workers. They are the workers of their own company. Not to get into the technical details, but every state they have respective include-exclude laws. So, for example, a CEO of the company can be included or excluded. But long story short, the essence of the exercise we did was that for an injured worker, if we want to provide workers' compensation coverage, it's going to cost at least $500 to $600 to $700, $800 or something like that. So that's just not doable. And the fact that they're just not employees of the corporation, they're just kind of working independently. So there has to be another product that acts like workers' compensation, like occupational disease. That's a term that you see in the industry, that may be a better suited product. So we don't have to put everything in the workers' compensation arena because they just don't fit into that mold. so I don't want to get out of the workers' compensation subject right now, but again, if you want to provide coverage for the gig demand workers, it's a different type of product, at least from the assessment that I've done, and I would love to hear kind of the panel thoughts on it, or someone in the audience who can challenge me on it. Maybe I'm completely wrong on it. But, you know, in terms of in that arena, it's a different product. We need to approach it slightly differently. And they have different needs and they're different underwriting challenges. So one of the challenges that we always thought about is that, okay, forget about the Lyft driver, forget about the Uber driver. We know that as a driver, you're expected to get lower back injuries. Of course, when an accident happens, we know what kind of injuries we should be predicting because of the front-end collision or back-end collision, whatever it may be. But if you're working, you know, in someone's yard and you have a back injury, how do we know that the back injury is associated with that 2 hours job that you were doing for that person versus it was done outside the work? So there are tons and tons of challenges. So I guess what I'm trying to get to is, so workers' compensation may not be the answer. Maybe there are workers' comp-like product out there that might be able to kind of fit their needs and their wants.
It's interesting. I hadn't really thought about, you know, redefining what is workers' compensation, you know, and that's actually a really good point. One of the major components here is really the information, right? Like, you know, at what point are you getting injured? You know, what's the automated FNOL we can get off this? How can we, you know, quickly get as much data to identify it, match them to the right provider? Something that Craig has been working on for quite a while. And so, Craig, I kind of have the same question to you. You know, are there any blaring trends or technologies or that you think are going to be really impactful? You know, from the IoT side, I imagine the whole conversation around 5G has got to be something that's really, you know, lighting up a lot of insights right now, or questions at least.
Oops.
Oh, there you go.
Take off mute. Sorry. I'd agree that the gig economy is a big part of it, but a couple other things you got to look at is remote workers. You know, robotics is going to be big, you know, so as the tendency for, you know, more severe jobs become less severe or less risky for people, that's going to be changing our industry. Drones, you know, again, removing risky behavior, better safety technology for people, you know, better health. It really kind of all contributes to some of the things that we're seeing in the industry, and really premiums would go down because of that, and we would have to adjust, you know, our company because of that as well.
So we have a question on the side here that's specifically geared towards the AF Group's Care Analytics platform. And in the context does patient data and physician billing data, Care Analytics, does AF's internal data sources, so the patient data, the billing data, everything that you guys are getting, does that provide enough analytical coverage on the doctors for you guys to really, you know, offer this insights, or do you guys also sharing data from other insurers?
So I would love to get data from other insureds. They just don't like to share. And so, so we use our own data, and we do use other sources, like from Experian and other places that we kind of film.
Oh, I think you fell back onto mute there, Craig. Oh. Still, Craig, can you check your mic real fast? Here's somebody. Oh, all right. Craig, I'm not sure if we can hear you, but I'm gonna get on to the next one. But I do believe that, yes, I mean, from what I know about the insurance industry, that is not the kind of thing that they're interested in sharing. Especially if AF Group is a notorious outrunner in the space of analytics and that stuff.
Again, we would love to have that data.
And you know, it does speak to kind of the future of information sharing. There was an interesting announcement earlier this week that Toyota is releasing 24,000 patents on, you know, electric vehicles and things like that. Something similar that Elon Musk did, you know, a couple of years ago, which is we just need to build this industry forward. It's a marketplace, right? I can give up a lot of this information because if people can use this and find value, then I think I have the best people I've hired. I want to give other people a shot at this. If they figure it out, we'll hire them, we'll pay for it. But, we don't have the power to do this all by ourselves. And we need to get an entire market, to really buy into this and create, universal value. And, it's the concept behind, sharing cancer research, sharing this data, and this is really where I think there's an interesting model of the future for insurance is really about how can we provide more services in exchange for data, and how can we find other ways of providing value to the marketplace in exchange for that information that we can then use as a more of a universal tool.
And the question is, how do you share that without, giving away your secret sauce? Because I think that's what every company worries about. And if we could do that, I mean, it would be really good. I think blockchain is the way to go on that. And, that's something we're experimenting with, and something that, a lot of different companies are saying, hey, we can share that way. And that way you don't have to share everything, but you can share what you need to.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's every CTO has been trying to pitch, secure data transfer in their organizations for 2 decades, but, finally they wrapped blockchain around it and it's getting passed. And so I do love that, the core of the problem, something that's been around long before the blockchain discussion, but it really has given a bit of a cultural phenomenon to getting the traction in that space. So we're excited to see, a lot of things coming out there. Blockchain, obviously very tied to the data question. And so one of the things that we've kind of been touching a lot on is the ability to access new data, to try new data. I think one of the incompetencies that I've seen, not so much incompetencies, but it's just new skill that they're learning is the ability to effectively gather that data, ring fence it, and test it in a way that they're okay with is something that a lot of insurance companies have really, really been struggling with. Emilio, I know as you've been building different companies and stuff like that, you're always looking at new data sources and how to price around this. And, you do have the legacy of being able to scrape it and build from scratch. But, in your experience, what have you seen that insurance companies can do to more effectively gather that data and run analytics off of it, particularly in the context of a company like SafeSite, which is bringing new data sets into the enterprise, and what it can be done?
The tough part with data, like anything else, is you have to have the correct data, and having the validity to make sure that the data that you're getting is the right data is a hard part. So what we're looking at is internally for our new MGA company is we're looking at multiple data points from different vendors. We're having those data points, and then with our carrier partner cross-referencing that to see if the data matches from prior submissions. We're going back on average about 5 years for the carrier's data, and then with the data points that we're getting from our multiple data vendors that are both public and private, we're cross-referencing that, making sure that they match and the overlaps are correct. And if there's a missing overlap, then we look at that on the underwriting more directly, and we won't push that to the predictive model. So as always, data is key. Getting the clean data and getting the proper data is the hardest part.
And how do you identify what's proper for the most part? I mean, like, you don't always know ahead of time. I mean, are you just gathering as much as possible, or, I mean, like, how do you even get started in identifying what the next, risk indicator might look like?
That's the $1 million question. What we're doing, obviously, is we're grabbing multiple data partners, their data points from public and private sources, and we're comparing them to historical data points that we have on the respective insured, and then cross-referencing that. Being able to cross-reference that is key, and looking at the previous data points that they provided for us. But then on top of that, we're looking at new data points like for construction, for example, which we're focusing very aggressively on. We're looking at filed permits. We're not looking at filed permits for the past 2 months, but we're looking at filed permits for the past 36 months. So we're looking at that and seeing what changes in scope of work they're doing, and what we can perceive and predict that they'll change in the future. So for us, it's more predicting and cross-referencing the true data points that they have.
So same question over to the AF Group side. You guys have more legacy infrastructure, not as much as most insurance companies. You're not as old as many. But, as you guys are looking at this from, an organization that has a lot of stuff in place, a lot of things need to change in order to ingest this data, how do you guys make those early steps into experimentation with new data sources? Whoever, actually, maybe Craig, you can answer from the IoT side. Adnan, you can ask from some of the other business lines. Adnan, if you'd like to start, I'd love to hear how you.
And then why don't you start?
Yeah, so I think we're just kind of using a very simplistic formula, and that is to do, identify a list of challenges that we're going through within the organization, whether it be on the claim side or underwriting side, IT, you name it. We have all these different groups, of course, like every other insurance company. So we are identifying their respective challenges, and then try to quantify that challenge, whether it's the most urgent challenge that we need to solve for, or we can go ahead and wait for that. So basically what we're doing is, again, creating a hierarchy of those problems. Once that problem is identified, we're finding the right partner, whether it be InsurTech partner or service provider, and just kind of using the proof of concept to bring in new emerging technologies, new skill sets, new capabilities to AF Group in order to kind of not to wait for the new digital transformation to come in, but just keep going and keep inventing ourselves. We are going through a digital transformation, so we are kind of getting rid of the old system. We have done that for a couple of other systems that we have already in place. Some of the major systems are going to be up and running in a couple of months or in the near future. So there is a strategy in place to kind of really transform AF Group, and so that it can walk into the, everyone is talking about the API technology, everyone's talking about technology, APIs and things of that nature. So we're making sure that we are going to be relevant in the near future, but we're just not waiting for that. We're just out there trying to solve for problems. So again, just as an example, if a claim comes in and they're dealing with a very specific problem, whether it be fraud or communication with employee, injured work, or whatever it may be, we're just tackling those problems right away and trying to bring in the startups, the new technologies, going to the proof of concept, as Craig mentioned, make you safe. So not waiting around, but yet we have a technology strategy in place to completely revamp our IT core system so that we can, we can do the business the new way in the near future.
That's interesting. And so, yeah, you're on the ground running, you're running experiments as we go. Craig, curious, how do you formulate that question? Like if you're looking at an IoT product, Make You Safe, like you mentioned before, how do you structure that pilot? What are the questions you have going into it? How do you test this with the validity of a solution like that?
Well, that's a great question. I'm not sure I can answer that, quite honestly, because we're still trying to figure that piece out. But to answer your other question, how do we go into into a lot of this? And honestly, just trial and error. So we go into it and we say, this is our hypothesis. We test it. If that doesn't work, and we can be nimble enough, we try something else, right? For example, and a hard question to answer is, how do you bring data in, and how do you make it accessible to the rest of the company quickly, especially when you have a lot of legacy data? To me, that's you have to look at it differently. So a lot of times we look at cloud. Can we get it in the cloud? Can we just bring it down simply through JSON or XML? Or for example, we're using RPA, so a robotic process automation that we can wrap around and pretend we're a user doing the same thing that some other user could do. So we actually had that in place for the last year and a half, and that's actually proved to be a temporary solution, but it actually proves to be something where we can actually put data into the places we need to.
Interesting. So kind of tying this to something that's tangible for us and the audience, what are some examples that you guys have seen? And look, a lot of this is still yet to be determined, right? We don't know if everybody has an iWatch on, if we can really, prevent people from getting, reduced premiums across the board yet. We haven't seen a lot of these tests at scale. But what are some of the ideas? What are some of the things you've seen? What are some of the experiments, some of the things that you might be excited about in terms of being able to deploy an IoT device, in a work environment, whether it could be health, medical, or construction, or anything above? What are the things that you think have opportunity? And what have you been excited about, whether or not it's actually proven itself out yet? Emilio, I know you're all about, the data, gathering the data off construction sites, new ways of gathering data, creating it. So what are the stuff that kind of, gets you excited in the morning that you guys are building a platform to one day hopefully ingest?
So for us, our main thing is about being proactive and not reactive. We want to make sure that before a claim happens, what can we do to mitigate that? What have we done to mitigate that? And for us, we built a risk management platform, or SafeSite has a risk management platform. With SafeSite's risk management platform, we can simplify that client engagement with the frontline employee. By being able to do that and gamifying that and making sure that they're being compliant with OSHA requirements, et cetera, we're simplifying that engagement from the top all the way to the bottom. So for the bottom employee, they're making sure that they're being proactive, that they're going to get a bonus, or that they're going to, through the gamification, they can get a Yeti mug or whatever. From the owner, they want to make sure that they have a lower loss ratio. By having a lower loss ratio, they're going to have better rates, et cetera. So and the whole issue with the industry right now, everyone's excited about being able to engage the customer. You want to engage them, and you want to make sure that, they're happy. For us, we want them to be proactive. We want them to change their company culture so they change the mentality and the way they've been doing business. And for us, by doing that, and by engaging with them on a daily, weekly basis, we're changing that behavior. And for us, it's about that behavioral change that we can do within that company structure. We're making changes dramatically. We have shown to decrease the frequency of claims by 57% by the usage of the technology. And for us, it's about decreasing that, making them more engaged, changing the company culture, and simplifying those processes.
It's scary to imagine. It's hard to imagine a world where there's been so much overlooked opportunity in regards to keeping people safe. It's the reality, but it's something where there should be a moral obligation as well to investing more heavily in these spaces. And so again, a huge thank you to all of you, because that is something that you guys do work on every day. And so kind of following that trail, what are some of the things you guys have seen, Craig, maybe in the healthcare side? Care Analytics is a platform that really was able to bring lots of actual results to the table with matching doctors, matching people. Where are you excited about the next generation, an AF group that might be able to more create similar meaningful impact in the workers' compensation industry?
But one of the things that we're doing right now, and this is kind of across industries, we're seeing as customer experience, and focusing on that. In fact, we're bringing a whole group in just for customer experience, because I think one of the things that's been lacking is, customer experience, covers your experience from, whoever you talk to from the beginning to the end, right? And this is something we started focusing on and understanding that, when I talk, the first impression is great, but so is the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth. And we got to be consistent across that we make a positive customer experience, and that we make it something that they're going to want to come back to and actually promote us. So I think that's a big thing that I'm seeing in the industry right now, and that we're seeing actually at our company.
And how do you guys, if somebody is injured and kind of, the claim process to the recovery process and everything that's going on, medical bills and stuff, that's a significant amount of touch points from a lot of different service providers. How do you guys, there's so many people that you don't have control over that could really damage that experience. What are some of the universal principles or methods you guys are keeping that experience consistent?
Well, I think that's a challenge, and I think that's why we're pulling a group together and a manager, or director to actually manage that whole process, and to identify the personas and identify the whole customer experience, and trying to figure out how we can better that. So I don't think there's an easy answer to that, quite honestly. And I think you can have a great experience from an adjuster, but you go to the service center and it's not so great, right? So you got to have that across the whole company. And I think it starts from top down. As soon as our executives say, yeah, this is important, we have to have that mentality. That's where we're going to make the biggest impact.
Interesting. I think like the personalities and the profiles concept is really key there. If your friend is asking for a restaurant recommendation, you wouldn't send every person to the same restaurant, right? So maybe there's an element, but you wouldn't send them to the same doctor, you wouldn't send them to the same auto technician. How can we, leverage this data and this customer experience to really, effectively serve people the experience and match them effectively? with the right service providers.
Yeah, and understand that we have different customers. I mean, claims, works with an injured worker, whereas policy works with employers, and agents. So there's different touch points, different customers within the same company.
And so, one of the things that kind of Emilio touched on as well is customer experience also can directly correlate to behavioral change and meaningful impact on risk, right? I mean, that's the underlying thing here is a lot of this. But Adnan, you guys have, across Travelers and a lot of the programs you guys have worked on, there's been a lot of different, markets in workers' comp alone or industries that you guys are deployed on. Have you seen any interesting examples in your experience where a technology was leveraged to drive serious impact on a risk?
Not personally. So with Travelers, I was working in the product development side, so I was not interacting with the insureds. As Craig mentioned, of course, the injured worker, the employer, and the agents. Unfortunately, I was not interacting with them, so I don't have any examples to share where the technology was a way of kind of communicating. But as you know, chatbots have been talked about where that can be the first point of contact. As a matter of fact, even before the chatbot comes in, before the injured worker comes in, you need to you can keep the employees engaged through digital assistant of sort or anything like that. So there are examples out there of other carriers pursuing, again, digital assistant, chatbots, trying to extract data as part of the conversation between the injured worker and the claim adjuster, trying to find value in that data and trying to share that value with the adjuster so that they can, make the claim process goes faster. So I personally have not come across any example, but I've been keep hearing about a lot of different technologies out there to interact with the customer. My favorite one actually so far was a claim adjuster TPA, basically. And as part of your doctor's appointment, they will get you a Lyft ride as long as you don't need stretcher or anything like that. I thought that was a very, very good way of keeping the injured worker in the loop. You have to get to your doctor's appointment because we need to make sure you're healthy and you get, recover as fast as possible. Adding that Lyft, on top of it was just, I feel like it was now the injured worker have no excuse but to go ahead and attend their, doctor's appointment and come back and be home and be safe. So there are a lot of other examples, but unfortunately have not come across on my own.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest problems in the health industry is just getting, patients to take their medicine. And it's like you've gotten everything, prescription, all the hard parts done. It's sitting on their counter, just getting them to take it. And then that is a huge driver of loss, hospital readmittance. I mean, things like that. And there's a lot of value in figuring out what are the small things that at scale have huge impact. Something as simple as getting to your doctor's office or offering a teledoc conference. It turns out 70% of doctor visits can be handled over a phone, in certain use cases. Okay, well, if that means talking to a doctor versus not talking to a doctor, that could have serious impact, in a massive way. And I think it's what's interesting about workers' comp is, there is a lot of opportunity here for product differentiation, and so in your product, how do you differentiate products and markets that are so competitive from a workers' comp space? I mean, kind of following on with your point there, Adnan.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, workers' comp is heavily regulated. So at the end of the day, the pricing may not be a big differentiator unless you're going direct to consumer. So price will be a differentiator. At the end of the day, service will make all the difference. And I think all the companies that I've worked for, including AF Group, everyone takes tremendous amount of pride in the services because once the injured worker that you're dealing with, it's a life-changing event for them, and you need to make sure that that life-changing event is taken care of. So what does service entail? So as Craig mentioned, keeping your agent in the loop ASAP every time there's a complaint comes in. Of course, you want to do all the best you can to make sure that the injured worker is taken care of. But then on the flip side, you want to make sure that employers are kept in the loop. There has been studies done where WCRI did the study where they looked at just the tone of your voice, the way you're talking to the injured worker will, may impact the claim outcome. They may go to a lawyer just because you're being not very sympathetic to them. So, I mean, all these small things makes tremendous amount of difference in terms of the claim outcome. But at the end of the day, I think we as AF Group, the end goal, as Craig mentioned, is the safety of the employee, right? We want to make sure we do everything within our capacity to make sure that we bring them whole, we bring them kind of back to the same health where they were. So I think service is by far the most critical component. Now, keep in mind, services for the agent is ease of doing business. Services for the employer is, of course, getting to know what's going on within their operations. They want to be engaged with risk control. They want to have a proper risk management system. But then when you're talking about the injured worker being the customer, of course, that slightly changes. So at the end of the day, you need to kind of make sure all these three different customers are getting the services, and especially during the time of need.
So that's a great point. So the value chain here is very interestingly distributed, right? So you have the employers, right, who are offering, services to their employees, right, which, I can group benefits, it's impossible to get any data out of that employer on that employee, right? It's another layer that's highly disincentivized to share any of that information with you, right? Giving you very little insights. And you also have, all right, we have the uninsured, but we also have, the company that is, employing them. And so this is where we're seeing a lot of interesting opportunities for new business models, right? Kind of the Zenefits concept of, hey, HR departments are completely overrun with 1,000 different things, right? If we can come in with a commoditized software like, HR software, we can, leverage this data to upsell insurance products and get a new benefit out of the side, right? There's a lot of these things that are coming in, insurance being so competitive. Now you have new market entrants from tech companies, other carriers, international carriers. It's so much easier to do business internationally now. So the competitiveness of this is really a whole nother world. And then it's digital. And so we're seeing a lot as differentiation is becoming more and more focused on services, product differentiation. And in a place like workers' comp, you're kind of uniquely situated where everybody is completely aligned on the same goal, right? The employee doesn't want to get hurt. The employer doesn't want to lose productivity, and the insurance company doesn't want to pay out a claim, right? And in order to do this, everybody's happy to leverage the same technology. It's like we're all aligned, but there seems to be a significant disconnect, right? And my question is to you guys, what can insurance companies do to more effectively collaborate with the employers in this spaces, and then at the end goal of getting this technology through to the end user? But there's still like all that efficiency gain is highly, highly valuable to everybody in that process. From a bottom line, from a employee retainment, standpoint, it's pretty universal. But I think a big part of this is we have to pick an industry or two within workers' comp to focus this thing in. How are we going to address this in nurses? How are we going to address this in, factory line workers? So just kind of curious if you guys have had, any experience or side to what can insurance companies do to more proactively collaborate with these insurance and with these other industries? And is technology that opportunity to be that glue that brings the parties together? I'd like to start here with Emilio, because I know that you've kind of bridged the construction world and such. And what has that experience been like for you?
Well, it's a great viewpoint on that. What we're doing to help mitigate and simplify some of the processes, and everything within workers' compensation can be simplified, from the submission from a submission, digitizing that submission, to underwriting, to predictive modeling, through the claim process. What we're doing with the claim process, your average claim, once they have a claim, it takes about 72 hours for the claim to be filed. What we're doing is we're digitizing that first notice of loss. So at the point of accident, through our application, they can click a button. They click the button to file a claim, but they'll connect directly with a telemedicine provider. The telemedicine provider will ease them through that with video or direct audio only, if it's a first aid claim at the time of loss. To be able to do that, and we're grabbing data, we're grabbing all the metadata to confirm that there's not going to be fraud from it, there's not going to be concern. If it's a first aid issue, then they can handle it right there on the spot. If it's not, we can send an ambulance to the location immediately and have them transported. The telemedicine doctor will communicate with the provider at that point. piggybacking with that, and they'll communicate on a constant basis to make sure that the employee is doing fine. Once the employee is released, we will be talking to the employee on a daily basis, asking them how they're feeling, if they're taking their medicine, what they need to do. If they're feeling better but they can't return to work yet, then what we're doing is we're making sure that that employee is can assist with a local charity. They're going to be getting paid. They can't do full duty work, but they're assisting a charity. So we're doing a social impact effect on that. So it's about engaging the whole, not only the employer, but the employee through the customer journey so they feel better throughout it. And it's about humanizing the process behind the whole event, throughout the whole journey.
Absolutely. And Craig, I know you guys, you specialize a lot in process efficiency and things like that, but how have you guys been able to bridge the kind of the gap between, the insurance carrier and the companies that they're working with? I mean, in some of the technology you're providing, these are geared towards a certain industry, and the companies that are leveraging that technology have a huge upside to them, regardless of the insurance situation, right? So, I mean, what are some of the ancillary benefits you've seen of these technologies in the industries that they're being deployed in?
So, I mean, one of the things I've been hearing in the industry is frictionless. How do we reduce friction? And whether that's for the employer or the agent or the injured worker, how do we do that? And I think there's a number of different technologies we're looking into for that, specifically around communications. We're doing a prototype right now for a digital personal assistant. Can we utilize voice to actually help, at home with Alexa, for example? Or just using a chat bot where we can do that, on your mobile phone, or you can do it on the web. So it's really reducing the friction and making it multi-channel or omni-channel, so we can do it in many different ways. And I think that's the key. It's not one specific way, but it's understand the customer, like we talked about the personas, but also making sure they can do it in the way that they are used to doing it.
So text message, Facebook message, where I am any given moment, really make this experience something that's,
Slack.
to the conversation you live. Yeah. Yeah, my friend group could use a Slack channel, actually. That's
right. So there's definitely different ways you can do it. I don't think one person has one way, and that's what we're trying to actually accomplish.
Cool. And so just to wrap up, Adnan, a slightly different question. If you could just fix one problem yesterday, like just wave a magic wand and just solve a major pain point for yourself. Does anything come top of mind when you with a question like that?
Wow.
I know it's a tough one to end you on.
No, I hear you. I think in terms of the workers' compensation as a whole, if you're talking about, and if I understand your question correctly, I think at the end of the day, I just see how I wish telemedicine was there when I was an underwriter. As Craig talked about, he's absolutely right about the whole friction side of the equation. If there is a way for me to create a system where hopefully first and foremost, you can avoid the injuries to begin with. So if there is a connected devices, whether it be wearable, that can say there's two people who had a slip, no fall. So, go ahead, let's just make sure that we're cleaning the floor so that there are no additional slips. So what I'm hoping for is that there are technologies that are available that will avoid these very avoidable losses. Like again, slip and fall is maybe the most common one. Just a quick example, there's a Stop and Shop nearby. I was walking around and I saw this robot came to me and started making noises, and realized that the robot recognized that there was a tiny spill and they wanted the store employee to go ahead and clean that. So I think that was a fantastic way where we can start avoiding losses. I think technology is out there, but I think technologies are just kind of individual in pockets. I don't think there's an ecosystem in place for the injured worker. So I wish there's not only where the losses can be avoided, but when the loss does take place, the injured worker has no fear of just calling in, not to worry about their manager, not to worry about losing their job. They just said, this happened on this date. I just want to let you know, and you know, and the insurance company can come in and really provide the services to make sure they are not getting themselves more injured. They're getting the treatment, you know, very quickly. At the end of the day, the goal is to make sure that the injured employee has been taken care of. So I guess I don't know if I'm giving you the right answer, but I wish that was resolved yesterday.
Right. It's not just fixing the leg. It's the mental health. It's the emotional damage. It's everything there, and that's the perfect world. It looks like we're a little bit over time. I have never been on time in my life, so that's a reoccurring theme. It looks like Emilio had to jump off. I probably had a meeting, but huge thank you to Emilio for joining us from SafeSite. Really interesting guy, great company to look into. Just thank you for joining, Emilio. Sorry. Definitely, I want to say a huge thank you to Emilio. Check out the site, SafeSite, and the new MGA. It's great stuff. Fascinating guy. AF Group, Craig and Adnan. I mean, you guys are you have a brand and a reputation in the industry for doing some really exciting stuff and creating really positive impact. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to share your insights and some of the experience you guys have had over there. And congratulations on the innovation team and then the projects you guys ahead of you. And also a recent partner of Plug and Play. So welcome back to the family, and we're excited to see you guys here soon.
All right, we'll see you. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye. Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.